This is proper research. Last year, so 2018 is obviously the latest stats. We can get 4,420 visible UK scale-ups in 2018, which is up 15% from 2017. Now, the reason we included that statistic is if you look at that as a percentage of what the startup market is, there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of startups in the same period. So you can see the difference between a startup and a scale-up just in pure metrics and what a scale-up actually means. And there's many qualified people in the room to talk about what a scale-up really means. I'll give some foundations and it'll be built on later. Having said that, 2.75 billion was invested in scale-ups in 2017, and that's with an average deal size of 41 million. So there are lots and lots of firms out there looking for scale-ups, looking to invest in something that has genuinely got market traction and got scalability. So, that sometimes aligns with our own business plans. What does a scale up mean for us? We can talk at the sort of top end of the market, but for many of us, a scale up might mean something different. So you've also got to take a step back and say, what does scale up mean for my business? What does it mean for my organization? Are we looking at disrupting an industry? I hate that phrase, but let's just use it. Disrupting or making noise in a global industry, in a national industry, global economy, a national economy, or a specific industry. Is it a niche scale up? And we'll come on to that in a minute because that's really, really important. Innovate UK have been great at helping scale up grants. They've average grant size 214k, 345 grants and 74 million. So I say this, we've got investors in the room and investors speaking. You don't just need investment sometimes. There's lots of different ways of financing a scale up. There's lots of different ways of being able to keep the cash flow running. Cash is king when starting up and scaling up and managing that. There's many ways of doing that. Having said that, 75% of scale ups use external finance. That's, I suppose, bread and butter and understanding. But it's interesting, the key stat here, which is one of the reasons we've engaged and involved a lot of investors in today's event, is that 40% don't feel they've got the right finance in place. So, it's great to have the dream, it's great to have the vision, got a bit of traction. Have you got the finance that can run you up over the next 3 years? Have we got the runoff? Because if we haven't, we can't scale. It's as simple as that. Scale-ups don't run on thin air, and when they do, they go pop. So, and 16% of scale-ups used equity finance in 2018. And interesting, a high growth business by a loose definition or fast growth business is a business that grows between 20 to 30% plus year on year. So 62% of scale-ups expect 20% growth. One of the interesting dynamics we've seen with a startup is that often if you start to get some initial market traction, you grow quite quickly. I've got my first 10, first 20, first 100 clients, and you grow, and it seems like it's all going great. Doesn't mean it can scale. Because growth can happen, obviously, through early adopters and innovators buying into your products and service, or you've hit your type A client, we call it, i.e. the ideal client that will buy from you. But scale-ups often mean you have to work in a wider markets, and means you have to work harder, which we'll come on to in a minute. So I'm going to give you 3 quick key insights. I'm not sure how long I've got. I'll give you 3 key insights. Now, some of these, there's no groundbreaking, sort of silver bullet here. I wish there was. But one of the key things here, and one of the things I really want to sort of major on for the next few minutes, is being absolutely clear on your value proposition. Know your value proposition. See, without a very, very clear value proposition, you don't have a scalable business. What you have is a good idea that some people will buy into, and there's a big difference. And a value proposition is not a marketing message or a strapline or something that sounds good. It is an absolute sense of clarity on the problem that you solve, a solution that you deliver, and a compelling reason why people should work with you. Very, very different. And it involves a lot of time and energy. It involves a lot of market research. It involves a lot of competitor analysis. It involves a lot of really sort of deep diving into the why. So a question that we would ask a startup or a scale-up that wants to work with us is why? Yeah, we did a podcast a few weeks ago. You've got a tech product, so what? What's the why? Just because you've got a piece of tech or you've got an idea or a way of delivering something, in our minds, That's the world. That's amazing. Yeah, but I can do it better. I can do it more efficiently. Yeah, but why? What's the value in that? What's the intrinsic value in doing what you do? And if you look at some of the obvious scale-up examples, is they've changed people's whys. They've changed, let's use some obvious examples, Airbnb. They have changed the way in which people think about and consume breaks, getting away. Airbnb evolved, their value proposition evolved over time. They started off around hotels, a different way of booking hotels. And now it's evolved into a whole different category. It's almost becoming a verb. Google, become a verb. It's changed the why. It's changed a core reason that people consume and buy products or services. So value propositions are so key. And if in a nutshell, if you can't explain that clearly in a sentence, you haven't got it yet. Because I know some of the investors in the room will back this up. Seb from Triple Point is speaking later on, and he'll back that up because it's so important. If we can't communicate a clear value proposition, what you end up doing is communicating loads of features, yeah, but it does this, and yeah, but it does that, but we're better and we're smarter and we're cleverer and we're this and we're that. But so what? That's just marketing. Features and benefits is marketing. Value proposition is a key why. There's a real big difference. Now, I want to really sort of leave you with that as a sort of takeaway right at the beginning of the day. If there's one thing that from my session you take away, take this away. And hopefully the other two are good as well. But take this away. Work on the value proposition. Really hone it down and narrow it to the point where you can stand in front of whether it's an investor, a potential client, a board member, a staff member, and say, this is it. And let people buy into that. If there's any questions about that, then we can talk about that later on in the panel discussion. The second thing we've seen the highs and lows of is when people are looking to scale and gain traction and build models, which we'll come on to later, is testing and measuring. One of the scariest things I see often with startups is the lack of measurements within the business, the lack of metrics within the business that you can model out. Now, there's obvious metrics. There's the vanity stats for show. We can talk through all the vanities. Yeah, but I've got X amount of traffic and X amount of hits and all the nice vanity stuff that some people might buy into. But we call it vanity stats for show, custom tracking to grow. It's as simple as that. And we're quite nerdy in our tracking, so we won't go into all the details now. But setting up the right data framework for your business is absolutely key to scaling. So whatever that data framework means, because that's different for each company, that's absolutely vital to scaling, because it shows the framework with which if you add more investment or you add more infrastructure or more staff or more sales activity or whatever it might be, if you add it into the right framework, you can see how it's going to scale. Now, it's never as linear as you think. But if you haven't got a data framework, how do you know you can scale a business? I sometimes sit with CEOs and say, well, what data frameworks, what metrics are we working with here to know if we can scale? And the answer is often very, very narrow and very shallow. That's not a criticism, it's just a reality to scaling. And again, I know that investors are looking for that, looking for frameworks and analytics and data that they can build models on, because modeling is absolutely key to this. So be exhaustive in your tracking analytics, and there's lots of open source APIs out there. There's lots of quite cool tools out there that you can use for not much of a monthly cost, but build it into we build dashboards, so we build all of our tools into one custom dashboard that acts as like a BI dashboard for the business. So it's measuring analytics and stats across the right set of metrics for that business. But make sure you think contextually. What are the right metrics for your industry? What industry metrics should you be measuring? Don't just go into Google Analytics. Obviously, that's kind of 101 stuff. That should be custom tracked anyhow. But when you're scaling, what are the right scaling metrics for your business aligned with your industry, aligned with your competitors? What numbers are your competitors doing? What does a percentage market share really look like? What numbers and data framework around that do we need in order to get that? See, those kind of questions and those kind of metrics enable us to really look at the scalability of the business and how we're going to scale, whether that's service-driven, product-driven. If it's service-driven, If you want to increase, we can put things down on an investor deck. We want to get 4% market share. Okay, what does 4% market share look like? What does that mean staffing wise? How can you scale that? Is it really scalable if you've got 0.2% market share currently? Does that make sense? So that data framework is really, really important. And looking at long-term value of data, not the short-term value of data. So in other words, I'll give you a really obvious example, really obvious marketing example. Short-term value of data will be something like we run paid media campaigns and we get X amount of data through. So we drive a lot of traffic, we get X amount of results through the funnel, X amount of conversions, and we get some results. Brilliant, but that's short-term data. Long-term data is how our SEO is increasing over time, how our inbound traffic is increasing, how the deep pages, the deep linking is working, our residual PR value, in other words, inbound links coming into the website, and backlink. I'm going to geek out now, but that's long-term value, long-term data. That means the business is sustainable without the paid media campaigns, or with less paid media campaigns. Does that make sense? So there's a difference between short-term value and long-term value in data. CRMs are a classic one for this. No, we're still using MailChimp. MailChimp is not a CRM to scale. It's as simple as that. It's a good email marketing database, but it is not, I'm not against MailChimp. We use MailChimp all the time. Don't know why I picked them for MailChimp, but because it comes up all the time. Yeah, we've got everything in MailChimp. That's cool. So you've got an email list. That's not long-term value. It's not long-term data. We can't see client life cycles. We can't see where they sit. We can't gather enough information about that customer or client to know how to work with them long-term. It's more of a broadcast list. And I know you can do automations and all that stuff, but there's a difference between short-term data and long-term data. So when scaling, you've got to look at the short-term results that we need, running through campaigns, getting results in, getting activity out there, and long-term residual value. Because a lot of value in a business is data, which John from Gannon's is going to go on to later. Last one from me this morning is about evolving and modelling. One of the key challenges with the startup phase is obviously we get some pre-seed, get some seed, develop a proof of concept, get some initial traction, it goes well, but it's not quite sticky yet, not quite working, haven't quite got it worked out, whether it's value proposition, whether it's sales and marketing funnels, whether it's we're winning customers but they're dropping off, or whatever the problem might be. That's when you evolve. The business has got to evolve. Within the first 18, 24 months, it's got to evolve into something that is a working model. So often, that's why it's quite hard to business plan at startup phase, because where you start on month one is often very different, and you guys will know this, those that are in that area. Month 1 to month 12, very different. Month 12 to month 24, very different. But in order to scale, you've got to evolve into what we call a market-ready business. So something that has actually evolved into what customers want, into long-term value, into customer retention, whatever those metrics are. Once you've evolved, it's about creating that model. So in other words, it's not just adding another sale on top of another sale or just winning the next 10 customers. It's the model to go from 0.2% market share to 2% market share. It's that model. What does that model look like? So if we added another £500,000 into the business, how would that exponentially grow it? How would that see scalability? Not just more sales and marketing budget or just more budget for staff. That doesn't equal scalability necessarily. That just equals doing more of the same thing. It's like insanity. Einstein's quote, isn't it? Insanity is doing the same thing over again and expecting different results. And sometimes there seems like a bit of insanity in the market. People are getting millions and millions, but you can't see the scalability. So scalability and modelling, in my opinion, go hand in hand. Those companies that create the ability to exponentially grow or to multiply, so you get the multiplier growth, they're the ones that really do well in the scaling area. Those that are just looking for more funding in order to do more things, model hasn't been proven yet. So think about that in terms of your business context. Think about how, okay, this is where I'm at today. This is where the business is at. We're looking at evolving it, and then we want to model it. What does that mean? Do you need to create set products and services? Do you need to create, like Trojan horse products into a company? Do you need to have tiered products? Do you need to have, the freemium, premium service? What does it look like to model out the business in order for it to be scalable? And one of the key things for board level is not to be reliant on you. It's absolutely key. No business is scalable until it's not reliant upon the founder, CEO. It's as simple as that. Even in our business at Wonderful, if the business is reliant on me and revolves around me, it's not scalable. It's as simple as that. Until we can model out how to exponentially service the market, then we haven't got a scalable business. So hopefully there are three quite simple points, hopefully fairly pertinent, applicable where you're at as a business. If you've got any questions around that, please come and catch me at the networking break. In fact, we might take some, I think we've got a bit of time now, haven't we?